Welcome back to the deep dive. We are here to take your sources, that mountain of material you want to get through, and distill it into something you can really use.
Exactly. And today, we have something, well, it's pretty different. We're not looking at reports or documents.
Yeah.
We're working from a piece of narrative philosophy called The Burden of the All-Hearing Crown.
Specifically, episode number 7, The King Who Heard Every Whisper.
That's the one. And this is, I think, really for anyone who feels like they're at the center of this constant information storm. Leaders, managers, or just anyone who feels like the digital input is making them more paralyzed than powerful.
It's so well targeted, the principles are just timeless. So our mission today is to really unpack this idea that maybe, just maybe, total control is the exact opposite of wisdom.
Right. The story throws this hook at you right from the start. When power hears everything, peace becomes impossible.
Wow.
Yeah, it just immediately makes you question this modern assumption that more data and more transparency is always a good thing.
What if knowing everything is actually a curse? A burden that's designed to corrupt your judgment? Before we dive into the four big lessons here, we really need to share the story itself.
Yeah, the context is everything. Let's settle in and listen to this uncomfortable tale. The story of a king whose greatest gift was also his greatest weakness.
Right. We want you to feel that paradox before we start breaking it all down.
There once lived a king whose domain stretched from the forested north to the deep blue coastlands. He was, by all accounts, destined for greatness, but he harbored a profound, unsettling secret.
And what was that?
He possessed the gift, or maybe the curse, of hearing every single whisper spoken in his kingdom.
Every single one.
Everyone, not just the shouts in the market. He heard the barely audible rustling of linens, the muttered complaints in the fields, the hushed arguments behind locked doors. From his palace, he heard the venomous gossip of courtiers, and from the most distant village, a grandmother's sigh in her sleep.
Nothing was private.
Nothing. Every thought spoken below a certain volume was his to absorb. And at first, this power seemed divine, a tool for perfect governance.
Of course. Lies wouldn't work.
Exactly. Conspiracies failed before they could even get started. The king delivered absolute, unimpeachable justice, a crime committed in the shadows, the whisper of the victim, the nervous murmur of the criminal. It all reached his ear instantly. For a while, justice seemed absolute.
But there's a but, isn't there?
There's always a but. Whispers are not always secrets of state. The king quickly learned that most of what people say is, well, it's mundane, emotional, and you can't really act on it.
I see.
He started hearing complaints, spoken not from malice, but from sheer bone-deep exhaustion. He heard the anger muttered in moments of private weakness, a frustrated farmer, a tired servant.
Things people say just to get it out.
Precisely. Expressions of temporary human frailty, never meant to become action, just vented into the air to relieve some internal pressure.
And fear, I imagine.
Oh, the fear. A ceaseless, overwhelming tide of it. Thousands of private anxieties about a sick child, the weather, a debt. Ghosts trapped in people's minds.
So this endless chorus of voices just
It consumed him.
completely. Imagine having no silence. Ever. How could he sleep when he heard every single person breathing, murmuring, fearing, complaining? His mind became this chaotic archive of every fleeting emotion from every subject.
And the trust must have just
Has
eroded.
faded away entirely. Why trust a minister's public loyalty when you heard him complain to his wife last night? Why believe a farmer is satisfied when you heard him curse your name in a moment of weakness?
So his rule changed.
It turned irrevocably harsh. He was no longer driven by wisdom, but by suspicion and overwhelming anxiety. He started reacting to fleeting emotions as if they were facts.
As if every whisper was an act of treason.
Exactly. He became paranoid, exhausted, ruling a perfect tyranny born not of malice, but of just too much information.
Wow.
Then, one long, sleepless night, with the collective sigh of his kingdom roaring in his ears, he finally realized a painful, necessary truth. What was that?
That power was never meant to hear everything. That perfect information doesn't lead to perfect governance. It leads to madness.
So some silence is necessary.
There's not just a gap in information to be filled. Some silences actively protect the fragile structures of peace and trust. They create the space for humanity to just be imperfect.
So what did he do?
He made a choice, an act of profound restraint. He chose to let the whispers fade. He actively chose not to hear, not to listen to the constant input. The story doesn't say how, but the intention was clear. He gave up the all-hearing crown to restore peace to his kingdom and to himself.
That story, it hits so hard because we're all dealing with a version of that, aren't we? That all hearing crap, the inbox, the social feed, the Slack channel, the weight of it is immense.
It truly is. We say we want a 360-degree view, but the story shows the flaw in that. The view is so complete and includes every stray thought, and you can't see the signal for all the noise.
Okay, let's unpack this. This is where it gets really interesting for anyone trying to navigate today's world. The king's choice to let the whispers fade. That was him building a filter. Let's start there with that first lesson. Not all knowledge leads to wisdom.
This is the absolute crux of it. We have this assumption that more data means better decisions. The king proves the opposite. He had raw information, the whispers, but that information, unfiltered and overwhelming, actively corrupted his judgment.
And the modern equivalent of a whisper. What is that? Is it the millions of lines of data a company generates? The real-time sentiment analysis on social media?
It's all of that. It's the unfiltered emotional stream of internal messages. None of it is useless per se, but it's dangerous when you treat it all equally.
Right.
Wisdom is the processing.
Right.
It's the ability to see 10,000 complaints about the office coffee and weigh them correctly against one single critical security alert. The king lost that ability. The sheer volume of the mundane dictated his entire state of mind.
So you have to be honest with yourself. Are you gathering signal, or are you just drowning in noise? If you feel paralyzed, you've probably let the volume of the trivial override the clarity of the critical.
Exactly. And that failure to filter, it leads right into the second big lesson here, which is that power requires restraint, not total control.
Yeah, the story maps that out so clearly. He goes from perfect justice to a rule driven by suspicion. How does that happen? How does knowing everything actually make him weaker?
Because constant surveillance destroys trust. And trust is the foundation of any legitimate power.
Right.
Once he had total information, he had to suspect everyone. Because everyone has moments of weakness, of frustration, of doubt. If you know every single negative thought someone has, you can't govern based on their actions anymore. You have to govern based on their worst potential.
It's the ultimate micromanagement. You're not leading people, you're managing their subconscious thoughts. And if you do that, you destroy their autonomy. They stop self-regulating because they know you're watching every little thing.
Yes. And the source is so clear on this. True strength is knowing when not to act. A strong leader has to allow for a blind spot, you could say. A space for human nature to exist without immediate punishment. That is restraint.
And that idea of a necessary blind spot, that brings us to the third lesson, which I think is so subtle but vital. Silence often protects harmony. It's about the need for private space.
Think about what the king was hearing. Exhaustion, anger, weakness. These are necessary safety valves for people. We all need a private moment, a whispered complaint, a frustrated sigh to process things.
They're not official policy inputs.
No. And if every private grievance immediately becomes a public issue or triggers an intervention, the atmosphere just becomes toxic.
The social contract breaks down.
It creates this culture of immense pressure,
Yeah.
where people are afraid to ever show weakness, even to themselves. Imagine a workplace where every muttered comment about a deadline was instantly on the CEO's screen. Psychological safety would be zero.
So silence is a buffer zone. It allows for imperfection. It lets that moment of weakness pass without shattering trust.
It teaches us that good leadership isn't about eliminating all dissatisfaction. It's about providing the space for it to be processed privately so it doesn't destabilize everything.
Which sets us up perfectly for the last and maybe the most actionable takeaway. Listening without judgment is as important as listening itself.
He was the greatest listener in history, objectively, but he was terrible at it. His failure was interpretation. He had no context, no nuance. He confused the intent of a whisper with its volume.
So if you're a leader and you get 50 minor customer complaints, high volume, low intent, and one critical report from your CTO about a huge vulnerability, low volume, high intent.
You have to be able to filter the 50 and act on the one. The king couldn't. The thousandfold fear about a bad harvest held the same weight for him as an actual conspiracy. He couldn't differentiate anxiety from malice.
That's such a powerful lesson for today with our rapid-fire data. If you react to the emotional volume instead of the strategic intent, you become just like that suspicious king. You overreact yourself into ruin.
True listening requires de-weighting the noise. And so we come back to the king's final choice. Letting the whispers fade wasn't a retreat from leadership. It was an act of profound, deliberate ignorance. He built a filter.
Which means that becoming truly well-informed isn't just about how much you can absorb, but how effectively you choose what to ignore. We are all wearing that all-hearing crown every single day with our phones and our jobs.
Absolutely. If you want to move from paralysis to wisdom, you have to prioritize constructive silence. You have to embrace intentional deafness to low-value, high-volume noise. Your judgment depends on it.
Which leaves us with one final thought for you to carry with you after this deep dive. If you could hear every thought and every word about your own life, every muttered frustration, every fleeting fear directed at you, what piece of information currently hidden by silence would you realize was absolutely necessary for your own peace?